Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our last and final week of our October Action Summit for Women Legislators. This week, our focus is on civil rights, and I have the honor and privilege of having an interview with WAN board member Dianne Valentin. 1 second here, I'll do a brief intro and then we'll jump right into our interview. So Dianne is a consultant to small businesses and nonprofit organizations, working in national, regional, and community nonprofit organizations on the grassroots and executive levels. As a political scientist, she's got training in international affairs and national defense, and has used her expertise to advocate grassroots and progressive issues on Capitol Hill. In addition to her consultancy and community service endeavors, Dianne previously served as the president of the Georgia WAN Board of Directors, and she is the co-founder and executive director of the Black Heritage Museum and Cultural Center, which is located in Atlanta, Georgia. So the Culture Center has this unique concept and vision in which it seeks to live out and reach its mission. It believes in education, economic empowerment, unity, and faith. And those are the four cornerstones that hold up the museum's pursuits to make this an organization that will fulfill its mission in the communities that it serves and in relevant ways. So forgive me for bumbling over there, but I do want to jump right in. Thank you again, Dianne, for being here. And so the first question to you is, I want to ask you about the Black Heritage Museum Culture Center. Tell us a little bit about your vision there and your reasoning for founding the organization.
Thank you, Ricky. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to talk about the Black Heritage relative to our conference. We pursued this many years ago. It was an idea that I've had for many years since I was pretty much a teenager, that I wanted to be able for us to have a place to go, to be together, to learn, to enjoy our talents and our skill sets and respect and authors, scholars, dancers, fine artists, whatever we had to offer, I want us to be able to come together to do it. And in my mind, I felt that we could do that all over the country. Now, initially, I didn't realize that we could go as a nonprofit. So for years, we were functioning. We had a number of events in different places. We were working out of North Carolina primarily. We focused on education and making sure that young people who were marginalized did not have an opportunity to be exposed to what was required of them to be prepared to move on to the next level of their educational career. We would do seminars and workshops and a lot of interventions with superintendents of schools who were not really aware of the disadvantages that they were placing in the path of a large percentage of their students. So that was a really heavy lift. But we started and we did it, and we kept doing it until we grew it to the point where we were serving maybe 1,500 students every year. So we were moving children or young people from one stage of economic and educational development to another. And we believe in the premise that when you help a family member, you help the whole family. Because there are many students who came through our programs whose families generationally have changed. They have moved from extreme poverty and are now amazing members of society who are contributing to the forward motion of society in a number of ways. And those are young people of all races who come through our programs. We had, when you know me long enough, you'll hear these stories over and over again. So, but it helps people understand, that you need to look into things. When, there are videos on our website that show you some of the young people who say that this was a chance that I had to take. I had to come see what I could do for myself, and they get accepted at the universities and colleges, and they move on with life. We have young people who have come through our programs who are now professors at universities. And when they came, initially they were in high school and they had no prospects. They didn't think that they had a future. Now their lives have changed, their children's lives have changed, and they reach back and pull their parents along with them. So that's 3 generations of people whose lives are changed. And that I say because the premise that we work from is that you help someone completely. You don't just tinker around the edges and no one gets to really resolve any of the situations that they might be in. We try to find ways that truly change people's lives. As adults, we should be providing our young people with every aspect of learning, whether it's the scholarly aspects of math, tech, all of that stuff, or the artistic endeavors of dance and theater, artistry. They should be inspired to write books. We need to be doing all of that for our children and with our children. So that's kind of what I wanted. And the past few years have been, I guess, tough for everyone because of the pandemic. And so we're going to be, when it's really safe again, we're going to be regrouping and deciding how we're going to venture. We have a lot of community partners that we don't want to, and young people that we don't want to let down. So.
I can imagine. And, your vision and reasoning was just so comprehensive. Like you said, what's the point in addressing one aspect of the issue? I was going to say, the plight of like the Black community, Black history. I don't want to say plight, but I'd say there's so many different pieces to that puzzle that need to be figured out. And even if you're working on a small piece of it, you're doing something. But so that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to change the order of my question, though, because what you brought up, it sort of is a great segue into this next question, which is, the Heritage Museum and Cultural Center talks about, quote, finding our way back to the positive aspects of Black heritage and culture, unquote. And so I want to ask you to speak a little bit more about that and how the civil rights moment, in your opinion, is remembered.
Well, that part is one of the parts that's closest to my heart. I love knowing about all the out millennium, and when I talk to young people, when we talk to young people, because it's not just me. I mean, we're a small group of people, but we have big hearts. So when we talk to young people about the lives of Black people and other people of color prior to the civil rights movement, prior to slavery or enslavement in this country, they sit there like in awe, like, and they're just open and they're sponges and they just want to hear and they want to listen and they want to know. And it gives them self-esteem. And when they walk away, they have an empowerment. They have empowered themselves with knowledge and information to know, oh, there were people who were doing this a long time ago. And this is good for all young people, not just young Black children, because like I say, when you know who you are and where you come from, you have a different sense of yourself. And when someone who doesn't necessarily look like you knows that as well, they have a different respect for you, because it's not like, oh, they're coming from the trauma and tatters of enslavement into society. No, we've built civilizations. We had an interruption with enslavement, and we're coming back from that. When you were asking about the civil rights connection, one of the things that I always want to share is that when enslavement ended in this country, Black people expected, rightly so, to have civil rights immediately. It didn't start in the 60s. We have been working on that since day one. And it's how the heritage part, the heritage part and the cultural part of this is that we want to talk, wasn't on the same path. Everybody didn't end up sharecropping. Everybody didn't end up starting a business. Everybody didn't end up in any one thing. We spread out across the country. We didn't just stay in the South. We didn't just go to the North. We went to the West. We went to Canada. We went to Mexico. We did all of that. And so we started the Civil Rights March back in the 1860s. So that's the perspective that I use when I talk about, civil rights. We have been civically engaged since the end of enslavement, and we have been pursuing that hard. We have been going after it hard ever since. I do think about that long continuum and how we have been pursuing our right to full participation in the society, our right to not just vote, but to have our needs that we pay for through our tax base respected. We talk about civil rights, and I think of them more, I know it's a federal protection that we have, but I think also about the state level, where you have, a long time ago, states were responsible for utilities, and good, bad, or indifferent, they were responsible, and states and local municipalities. Black people paid, and other people of color, Native Americans, paid their fair share of the tax base. And we were meticulous about doing that because we didn't want to lose our land for taxes. And you could see the line of demarcation where services were abundant and where services ended. Now, Black people were paying the same tax rate as white people, but they were getting none of the services. And of course, that went on for decades, and it still goes on in some places where services are not fully rendered to people who have paid for them. And you don't have proper sewage, you don't have proper water, you don't have safe drinking water, but you paid for them when you paid into that tax on that bill. But in another community, right across, quote unquote, railroad tracks, they're fine. They have safe drinking water. They have good care of their communities. So someone asked me at a dinner table once about that, about how I felt about that, because I was sharing that concept. And I said, well, Black people have paid into this for decades and decades and decades since the end of enslavement. So how are you asking the question, well, how are we going to pay for it? Every time some community needs something, the question is, how are we going to pay for it? I contend that it was already paid for, but you just didn't do the work. You didn't do what was necessary to make sure that community had clean water. If you want to go back and look at compounded interest and on all the money that those people paid in that you didn't do the work for, to pay for the clean water. So it's a very broad look for me when I think of civil rights. I don't just think of a period where there were marches, because we've always done what was necessary to move our people forward.
I 100% agree. I think the timeline is important too, because I've seen those memes or those charts where they talk about slavery started in 1619, and then you had the Civil War ends in 1863, and then you have almost 100 years later or 100 years later, then you have a civil rights movement. But I think, to be very clear that after enslavement is when, our push for civil rights really started. Yes, I think that's very strong, poignant point for sure. And so this next question I have actually tees it up real nicely, because like you said, it is a broad movement. It is not just about one group of people either. And so, here at WAND, we believe in intersectionality, as we see that as an importance in achieving a just, peaceful world without war. And the civil rights movement in many ways was an intersectional movement between social injustice, racial injustice, and economic equality. And so many centers like the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC, which you spoke about earlier in the interview, those kinds of centers serve as an educational hub about how those issues intersect. And so I want to talk about, in your center, the Black Heritage Museum and Cultural Center. How are you all doing that, and in what ways, if you can give us some examples?
For us, I may have mentioned before that the museum in Washington is sort of static as a Smithsonian. It has, I'm sure it will update its exhibits and maintain, curate its whole exhibits and everything. We are more fluid. We have the ability to work with artists and authors, and it's a living, active sort of thing. We have to expose our children to so much more than what necessarily can be, shown on a tour within a building. All that's necessary. We need all that, but we also need the fish fries.
Yes. Yes, for sure. When we can get back in person, I want to come to a fish fry. Have to do that. Okay, so I'm going to tie in some of what's going on here with our fight, one of our main goals in WAND, which is, the fight against militarism. And I want to talk about, in your opinion, or at least ask you, how you see civil rights and that struggle being connected to the fight against militarism here in America, or even abroad.
Again,
because it's a global fight.
Yeah, it is. It's a global problem. And again, we talk about on the continuum, and our communities have been under the thumb of militarism forever and 3 days. We understand that we're paying people to kill us, in essence. When we pay into these systems, because we have to, it's how we live, we're willing to live in a civil society. we're willing to do all the things that are necessary to have, uh, social enterprise and everything. It's just the reciprocity is not there. We have found that one of the ways to control communities is by use of force. And it's unfortunate that in this country, it is a reality because we have touted ourselves as a democracy, but we are so willing and so eager to harm humanity with weapons of war. You'll probably be able to go find news feeds or images in the 50s where local police forces, particularly in the South, had tanks that they used against communities. So it's been a long, long, long road of militarism in our communities. And unless we can decide and agree upon, have the collective will to commit to peace and equality and humanity, we're not going to be able to peacefully coexist. And I'm not accepting that as the final answer, because I'm always telling people we need to move from a war society to a peace society. I mean it, because our children thrive, they learn better, they excel, their imaginations soar when they're in a peaceful setting, when there's no stress, there's no trauma. And they are really who I focus on. You will always see or hear me talking about the young people, and I always want to give them a space to be free, and freedom is a big deal for me.
You said we need to have collective will. So when I hear that now, and being the director of will, I think about, yes, if we had more of having our change makers and our mover and shakers on the ground, like our will members, who are introducing policy against 1033, doing all of these things we've been talking about this entire month, introducing legislation for social and equity programs, and especially as they benefit women. So my last question to you is, as a member of our board, I have to ask, and sort of a nod to our will members. Let's talk a little bit about why, you feel it's important to have, why will is so important to us advancing our mission here at WAND.
In my heart and in my soul, believe that our state legislators are the answer to all the questions, because they are right there making the decisions, using everything from their intellect to their hearts to determine what can I do today to best serve my constituency. The little communities that our legislators represent are people. All kinds of people live in their districts, in their regions. And when you have someone who is of good heart and good mind and truly believes in civic engagement and democracy, who believes in humanity, you stand a better chance of having a true democracy where, and I know we are a democratic republic. I know all that technical stuff, but to live in a true democracy where everybody is represented, and it doesn't necessarily mean that people that are part of the legislature look like mayor have to be representative of all of the people that live where they say that they represent. And I believe that when women get to equality within state legislatures, there's going to be a sea change, because women tend to be fearless when they're true to themselves. And that's what I'm waiting for. That's what I know is possible. I know that these women in the legislatures can be fearless. They're all brilliant. They got there because they had something that their community said, oh, we need you to help us right now. So we're going to put you in this place. Please do this work, you know? And I'm just confident that as women, they can handle it. They can get it done. And I think what Juan does, and I think we do it very well, is provide backup. Oh, you got to go talk about this. Hey, let me give you this, because this is what you need right here. They ask you about this, show them that. Okay. They ask you about that, we got you covered. And I think Juan does that exceptionally well. And I'm hoping that our will members know that they can always come to us. And if we don't have it right on the spot, right then, right there, we'll find a way to get it to them if it has anything at all to do with our mission.
I just want to double down on what you were saying. For the will members, if they need anything, we are definitely here as a resource, because they are leaders in their own right. They got elected, you know, because their constituents, their community saw them as someone who could answer, was an answer for an issue or a problem. So we definitely want to be as helpful and useful to you as we can be. But I agree. I think it's a great mashup of women legislators, and I love that we're working with women because you know, we do tend to bring with us not just our experiences, but also, you know, that soft sort of side that's needed when you're thinking about economic and social programs. And yeah, you know, when we come together and we put our minds together, a lot of times the policy is a lot more holistic for the community and more healthy that way. So really excited to be here in the role and to have this conversation with you. Before we end, do you have any closing thoughts?
Not many, but I want you all to know that WAND has been an amazing organization. I've been a part of it for over 20 years. And this whole will process is just amazing from my perspective. We are key, I think, in moving so many things forward. And I think that if you are a woman in the legislature and you're a part of WIL, you should encourage your fellow members who are not part of WIL already to become members of WIL, and you know, build it, make it strong, so that when we pursue policies and rights and just developing that collective will, we'll be stronger for it.
I agree. I agree. Thank you so much for doing this, for agreeing to do this. Thank you for your support as a board member. And thank you to the WIL members for everything that you're doing in your respective communities. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of WIL. And yes, do reach out. Let us know how we can be helpful. And hopefully you've been tuning in to the entire month. You've enjoyed it. This was an interview with the lovely Dianne Valentin on her role as the executive director in the Black Heritage, I was going to say history, Black Heritage Museum and Cultural Center located in Atlanta, and all the great work that they're doing there in the community. So thank you again, Dianne. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.